What's up? Today I'm back with another video in my one weird trick video series. So today we're going to talk about one interesting trick that I may have not yet mentioned regarding weight loss, or more specifically, fat loss. If you've ever consulted me about weight loss, we've probably sat down, I've asked you your specific goals, and then depending on the amount of time that or the time frame that you want to lose this weight over, I'll recommend an average daily calorie deficit for you. So you've probably seen me pull up the total daily energy expenditure. It's basically a tool used to estimate how much calories you use at maintenance each day, and then from there we can recommend a calorie deficit. So we plug in information such as your height, age, weight, estimated body fat percentage if we have that, and your activity level. Notably, the most total daily energy expenditure calculators do not have a modifier for fidgetiness, the amount that you kind of gesticulate when you talk, move around throughout the day. So there's no modifier for your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or your NEAT. I've mentioned NEAT in previous videos. Still, as always, my number one tip to aid in your fat loss journey is probably still just sticking to the nutrient-dense, calorie-poor foods. So foods that take up a higher volume in your GI tract. They're going to help you feel more satiated while in a calorie deficit. But let's get back to this TDEE calculator. So with the total daily energy expenditure calculator, the one trick that I'm going to recommend here is essentially to slightly underreport your activity level if you want to lose weight. And here's why. A lot of people will over-report their activity level in order to impress me or themselves or whoever, whatever their reason is. I've had a lot of new gym goers come to me and say, oh, I exercise 5 to 7 days a week. And I kind of look at them skeptically and for a second, then my follow-up question is, okay, for how long, for how many months have you been exercising 7 days a week? And they're like, the past 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay, here's why I don't think that's a great idea. Maybe if you had prior history of being an athlete 5 to 7 days a week, sure, go at it, have at it. I believe in you. But if you're just starting, I think that's going to promote higher rates of burnout. You're going to wash out and probably quit going to the gym within several months if you're trying to really make yourself go 7 days a week. Not very realistic for a beginner who still is not even in the habit forming stages of their really building up an exercise habit. So, my recommendation is essentially to lower what the TDEE calculator puts out as your maintenance calories. You can slightly underreport your exercise frequency, because I find a lot of people, they'll not exercise as hard as they could be during each of their individual sessions, which brings down the amount of energy expended. So I find, aside from measurement errors in terms of tracking calories, I do find a lot of individuals, they'll come to me and they'll say like, okay, we'll put in all their info, their total daily energy expenditures around 2,000 calories. So I recommend, based on the rate of time that they want to lose weight over, I'll recommend a calorie deficit. So somewhere, if your maintenance calories are around 2,000, maybe I'll recommend somewhere between 1,500 to 1,600 calories a day. They're going to lose about a pound a week of fat, hopefully, without measurement errors. But then you get into the issue of, once they get into that calorie deficit, they start to move around a little bit less. They start to be a little bit more still throughout the day. They stop gesturing as much when they talk. Maybe they're just more sedentary. Maybe their training sessions aren't as intense. And before you know it, that reported 5 days of training, it could make it so now their energy expenditure is more like that of a person who's only training 3 days a week. And maybe now they're only burning, maybe now their maintenance calories are like 1800 calories, and then their calorie deficit is only 200 calories a day. And then as a result of measurement error, well, now maybe their calorie deficit is non-existent, so now they're losing no weight at all. So my one weird trick here is going to be to slightly underreport your activity level if you think you may be subject to any of the following. So if you think that you're either measuring your calories incorrectly, your training isn't as intense as it could be, or you're missing training sessions throughout the week, and maybe the exercise frequency you reported into the total daily energy expenditure calculator is inaccurate, you might benefit from slightly underreporting your activity level. And this is essentially going to cause the total daily energy expenditure calculator to put out a lower value for your maintenance calories. And then when we put in an energy deficit of that, the magic 500 calorie a day deficit to lose a pound a week, that's 3,500 calories a week, then when you do that, you're more likely to still be in a deficit after you account for moving around a little bit less, maybe slight measurement errors in your calorie tracking, all of these things. Because when you're talking about that small of a deficit, it's really easy to completely negate the deficit through measurement errors or just decreasing your activity levels. A bit of reasoning here, when I take an average sized person, anywhere from like 130 pounds to 200 pounds, I try to keep them in a relatively modest calorie deficit. Once you get, if you're consulting, like, this is for my trainers out there who might be watching this video, if you're consulting bigger guys in that, like, 250 pound to 300 pound range, you could start to recommend bigger calorie deficits in the realm of, like, 1,000 calories a day of deficit, because that bigger individual, their maintenance calories might be like 3,000 calories or so, and if they're in a deficit of 1,000 calories, well, they're still going to get adequate protein intake. If they're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, they're still going to get all of their vitamins and minerals, all their micronutrient intake, sufficient protein, even in a big deficit. But when you take smaller sized people to average sized people and you put them in a big deficit, they're more likely to become malnourished, inadequate protein, contributing to higher rates of muscle loss. They're more likely to be deficient in some micronutrient, some type of vitamin or mineral in there. So that's why the smaller a person is, the smaller the maximum calorie deficit I'll recommend for them. So if somebody presents to me like with, I want to lose all of this fat in a really short frame of time, I mean, I'll do the math for them. So the way I do it is I'll take the total number of pounds of fat, multiply it by 3,500 calories per pound of fat. That's going to give you usually a value in the tens of thousands of calories or hundreds of thousands of calories, right? And then you are like, how many months do you want to lose this in? Do the months times number of days. So then it'll be something like, okay, 100,000 calories divided by 180 days, then you put out an average daily calorie deficit for that person. If the average daily calorie deficit is like really high and it's a really small trainee, I'll just outright tell them, I don't think this is going to be good for your health. Maybe you could do it for a few weeks if you really want to, but, consult your doctor. I don't want to be responsible for having you become a lot less healthy by being, malnourished, deficient in protein or different micronutrients, because this person is probably not aware of the consequences of them being in such a severe deficit. Whereas if you have a really big guy, 300 pounds, 400 pound guy, I feel a lot more reasonable about putting them in a bigger calorie deficit, because let's say their TDEE, total daily energy expenditure calculator, says their maintenance calories is like 3,000 or 3,500. Well, they could responsibly be in like 1,000 calorie a day deficit, 1,500 calorie a day deficit. That's a huge deficit. Yes, they're still going to incur increased rates of muscle loss, But if they have that high protein intake and they're taking in all their vitamins and minerals, they are going to be overwhelmingly losing more fat. And I think when you get into somebody of that advanced body size, shout out to Chad Wesley Smith, advanced body size. When you get into coaching individuals with that advanced body size, losing fat really takes precedent over muscle retention. They can always gain that muscle back later. It is a lot harder to gain muscle than it is to lose fat, but as long as they're keeping that protein intake high and resting well, still resistance training, they will definitely be able to mitigate the rates of muscle loss and hopefully lose mostly the desired type of tissue there. All right, so recapping it, one weird trick, slightly underreport your activity level in the total daily energy expenditure calculators, and that's going to give you a lower maintenance calories, increase the chance that you're in a deficit. This is outside of the realm of people with different metabolic conditions, issues that might affect your other physiologic processes besides just activity level. I know that there are some medications out there and certain hormonal issues that certain people have that can essentially cause them to just, outside of just moving less, their body's basal metabolic rate is less. So not even accounting for their movement rate, some people just burn less energy at rest if you were to have them rest all day. So this might not be the best advice for those types of people, but yeah, if you find that you're not training hard enough or you're measuring calories inaccurately, try out this one weird trick and let me know if it works for you. Drop me those questions and I'll make another question and answer video very soon.